Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webcast, Flexible Solutions to Speed Your Molecules to Phase 1 Clinical Trials. I'm Kaylin Chiarello-Ebner, the Managing Editor of Special Projects for Pharmaceutical Technology, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We are pleased to bring you this educational web seminar presented by Pharmaceutical Technology and sponsored by Patheon, part of Thermo Fisher Scientific. I would like to share this description provided by the company. Thermo Fisher Scientific provides end-to-end drug development and manufacturing solutions to customers of all sizes through Patheon and Fisher Clinical Services. With more than 40 locations around the world, the company has extensive capabilities, including API, biologics, early development, clinical trial solutions, and commercial manufacturing. I have a few important announcements before we begin. This webcast is designed to be interactive, and we encourage you to ask questions during the event. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. You can enlarge the slide window by clicking on the small green icon in the upper right-hand corner of the slide window, or by hovering your mouse over the lower right-hand corner and dragging the window to the desired size. The slides will advance automatically during the event. If you have any technical problems viewing or hearing this presentation, please click on the question mark help widget in the dock at the bottom of your presentation window. I would now like to introduce today's speakers. Mark Lawler has over 20 years of experience in product development across the drug and healthcare sectors. As the Senior Director of PDS Operations, Mark leads the Milton Park Development Services team, which specializes in the development of oral solid dose products for first-in-man and early clinical phase studies. Mark is responsible for ensuring the timely delivery of clinical materials to clients, ensuring relationships are effectively managed, and operational procedures are geared to flexibly meet the needs and challenging timelines of early development projects. Mark has a doctorate in pharmacology from the University College Dublin. Helen Underwood has over 20 years of technical experience within the clinical trials environment. Her capabilities include demand planning, sourcing, production, and project and relationship management for both drug and ancillary supplies. As the Director of Strategic Client Relationships, Helen is responsible for all aspects of the client experience, relationship development, and establishing solutions that improve the client experience, as well as being a champion for the client within Fisher Clinical Services. Helen is a registered pharmacist, having received her bachelor's degree in pharmacy from Heriot-Watt University in the UK and successfully qualified from the state hospital sector. Thanks so much for joining us today. Mark, you have the floor.
Thank you, Kaylin, and thank you all for joining today's call. Today we're going to share with you our Quick to Clinic offering, which aims to get you phase 1 clinical trial material as soon as possible. We promise in this offering to deliver clinical material, including QP release to clinic, within 14 weeks of receiving your API for formulation work. To understand this better, we're going to show some market perspective and industry trends to explain more why we feel speed to market is essential and how our offering fits with that need. We will talk a bit about the benefits we have gained through the Patheon Fisher Clinical Partnership and what advantages that can offer you. We'll describe how the process works, what the ups and downs of those processes are in terms of technical feasibility, and share with you a real-life case study to explain and demonstrate how it works in real life. At the end, we'll finish up with some lessons learned and top tips for accelerating your product through the phase 1 clinical preparation timeline. During the course of the presentation, we'll also ask you your opinion on a couple of important points in terms of what helps drive your choices of vendors in the phase 1 development area. And with that, I'll turn it over to Helen.
Thanks, Mark, and hello. So this slide is probably no surprise to those of us who are practicing in the industry, but let's cover it as we can. So we see on the left-hand side at the macro level, we have a number of trends, such as on the top left, legislation. So we have tax reform, as in the US.
I think we've lost Helen there, so let me just pick up on where she left off. So we have tax reform, we have pressures on companies to be able to deliver molecules quicker, we have more stringent regulations from the governments, and the pressure to get drugs to market as soon as possible. With that, many of the companies that are developing molecules for phase 1 are small companies which have got backing from venture capital firms, and they inherently put pressure on companies to make sure they can deliver proof of concept as quickly as possible. Last but not least, of course, we are also get pressure from patients. In the real world, there are people waiting for new medicines, and the sooner we can get to fill those unmet needs, the better for everybody. The pressures on the industry to develop phase 1 materials quicker is best illustrated through this slide, which shows basically the amount of investment needed to progress your molecule through the development life cycle and get it into commercial supply. So since the 1970s and 1980s, there's been a sharp increase in the average amount of money that it takes to progress a molecule through the clinical development cycle and get it onto the market. This slide basically shows that between the 90s and early 2000s and compare that to the last decade, you can see that on the right-hand side, the total investment needed to progress a new molecule to the market has risen from an average of $1 billion in the 1990s to 2000s to over $2.5 billion in the most recent decade. So because of that investment, it is really important that companies are able to identify the most likely successful assets as soon as possible, and this is what drives us to make sure that we can get proof of concept as soon as possible.
Thanks, Mark. So we're just going to close on some industry trends. What's happening in the outsourcing environment? So this slide covers those industry trends. A clarification first. The Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development is an academic research center based at their university in Boston. Interestingly, according to Tufts Research, no company in our sector will develop drugs entirely alone going forward. As we reflect on the increase of collaborations, the rise of patient interest groups, and charitable trusts engaging in research, along with the intensified targeting of rare diseases, we can appreciate their findings that indicate companies look to outside providers to better leverage their own internal resources while gaining external expertise and increased efficiency. So why is it that they're choosing to outsource? It can obviously be a necessity for those virtual organizations who choose this route to minimize the capital investment required to equip and maintain GMP facilities and the burden of carrying the appropriate licenses. There are other factors, though, as we see in the right-hand side of the box. The flexibility it provides to turn on and off those resources when you require them, and not having to keep them on your books all the time. Access to specialist expertise from those who perform those activities on a day-to-day basis and who are up to date with technology and regulations. For others, there is less internal capability, or increasingly, choices are made to outsource more projects, including the more complex ones, keeping innovation and special items core. There is a trend developing for more scope and complexity to be outsourced, whilst retaining a smaller and smaller core service. This affords simplification to the firm, and so they can truly be an expert on the valuable science that they particularly wish to focus on and what their firm values. Through the breadth of project suppliers are exposed to, they have a focus on problem solving and have often not only seen an issue, but found a solution in a prior situation, and so they can also advise on industry best practices. Hence the innovation and problem solving techniques and efficient processes that deliver speed coming through that outsourcing solution. Within the development and clinical supplies arena, there is a lot of variety and variation in projects, and a great deal of specific technical knowledge to exploit, the ability to reference multiple experts, and, as mentioned previously, exposure to similar issues. We're now going to take a look at the integrated team. So what's interesting about this map is that there's lots of colour on it, so we are going to explain what those various dots represent. But what's really important is just a reminder that we are a fully integrated organisation. We just recently passed our 1-year milestone together and celebrated our success and our achievements. The alignment brought together two companies of significant scale that collectively offered advantages. And as you can see from the map, we have an extensive global network of 23 sites. We have 5 located in the EU and Switzerland, and each offers a range of options and capabilities. So for those European outfits, they're geographically located in prime hubs to effectively service global clinical trials. We have a facility, it's a small dot in the UK, based in Horsham, and in the mainland Europe, we have the Swiss and Basel facility with Weil am Rhein in Germany for Fisher Clinical Services. Our development and manufacturing and packaging sites are obviously in close proximity, and you'll hear reference to Mark's Milton Park facility and the Horsham facility, which are a very short distance apart. And the fact that we have this geographic co-location between multiple sites affords the timely transfer of product. Our integrated service management. What does that mean for you? Well, by taking an integrated approach, we design our process to increase business value through reduction of waste and cycle times to enable successful outcomes. Some practice points that we should reflect on as we look at this geographic map indicating where we are in the globe. We know and we trust each other. Having complementary skills and expertise, our colleagues are comfortable to speak openly and frankly, holding themselves and each other accountable for delivery. We have worked on our processes and have a growing track record of delivery. We regularly work together to improve our customer service and streamline our process. In the last year alone, we have completed many Just Do It projects, multiple Kaizens, and many integration initiatives. And we won't stop there. We really believe in the continuous improvement philosophy. And through that philosophy, we have developed processes and the guidance for customer partnership by leveraging those tools and methodology. Within our integrated teams, we have a common purpose and values, which enables us to focus on what we can deliver for you to make that a pleasurable client experience. There are, of course, also robust quality arrangements in place, both between the respective quality teams and the qualified persons, and we also have fully documented qualified person to qualified person agreements, and we'll return to that later. Through the sites that you see on this map, we offer convenient access to our fully integrated global network of capabilities and expertise, and we are here to help you achieve your success at every milestone. So just to complete this slide, the API manufacturer is covered by those blue dots for those who may require the full outsource model. Our biologics capabilities are coloured in orange. You'll find Mark's team, the early development group, coloured in yellow. Clinical trial solutions are the red targets, the Fisher network, where you'll see core services located at the major sites and several distribution hubs strategically placed for access to key markets, which you'll notice span South America and Asia. And we also have commercial manufacturing in green. I'd like to now invite Mark to discuss the concept of Quick to Clinic.
Thank you, Helen. So the Quick to Clinic is a service that we first conceived back in 2009. It was developed in recognition of what we saw from our clients, that they needed to get into phase 1 trials as quickly as possible. We work with a wide range of clients, some of which are really driven to meet that proof of concept very quickly, and others that want more robust formulation development programs. The Quick to Clinic offering is really focused on the former, where you want to get a quick read on both the safety of a compound and get a read on clinical effects as quickly as possible. So the driver to get the proof of concept is high, so that you can feed back to your stakeholders whether it's a likely success or not. Since 2009, we've evolved the offering as we gained more experience. Since then, we have learned how to trim the timeline, how to mitigate risks that come up in the development program, and we've also widened out the offering to address a wider range of molecules. As we all know, many of our molecules that are coming through the development pipe these days tend to have solubility challenges, or they have other physical challenges that we need to overcome. Our program here is designed to get molecules into clinic as quick as possible. It can be as simple as putting an API in a capsule, or it can be a simple blend that will take you, using standard excipients, that will take you into a dose form that you can give patients easily and quickly in the clinic. In 2017 came the acquisition of Patheon by Thermo Fisher, and this really opened the door for us to work together to not just develop your dose form and provide stability data in a quick timeline, but secondly, to also add on the packaging and labeling needed to get our customers into clinic fast. We saw this as a very complementary benefit to the offering that was already there, and by working together, we aim to optimize the timelines by which we can deliver a very quick service to clients. So now our offering is such that we can, from the point of receipt of API, we can develop a dose form, generate stability data, and then progress it into the clinical packaging and labeling and release it to clinic by a QP, all within 14 weeks. So this program is really thinking about speed into clinic and speed in getting results quick. Of course, not all programs will be driven by this. Some programs may demand more science put into the dose form up front. Some may be driven by cost elements. So we'd like your opinion on what really drives the decision to outsource phase 1 material. And for that, we have a question that we'd now like your input on. So when we're talking, sorry, go on, Kaylin.
Let's now take a brief polling question. You can click directly on your screen to submit your answer. And the question is, what is the main driver when outsourcing phase 1? Cost, time, or science? Again, what is the main driver when outsourcing phase 1? Cost, time, or science? Give you one more second to answer. And pulling up the results, it looks like there is a split between cost and time. Back to you for the presentation.
That's a very interesting dynamic. I think perhaps a little bit of a surprise, but certainly appreciate the honesty there. Mark, does that create any insights for you?
Yeah, I think it's very insightful that we have very few respondents, if no respondents, suggesting science, and there's an equal split between cost and time. So we recognize that time is extremely important for the reasons we outlined, to get proof of concept quickly so your stakeholders can make decisions. Cost we see as an important consideration, especially in today's market, which is highly competitive in the European region especially, but in other regions too. And so we aim to provide a service that fulfills both the timeline expectation, but also is at a competitive cost. So
Thanks,
with
Mark.
that, we move to discuss a bit more about the benefits of one relationship.
Let's start by looking on the left-hand side at the integrated service model. So it may be self-evident, but you will have less vendors to manage, which obviously reduces the administrative time burden for oversight. And it can also provide a soft saving, as it can save time in the procurement phase, as it can be a time drain for organisations to compare multiple vendors for each supply section. The client is not the middleman in communication, so there's less opportunity for misunderstandings, and there is no passing off, as could occur with 2 or more vendors, each thinking that an issue or action belongs to the other. It allows focus on value-add activities, and over time, the integration of data and sharing can result in better performance across a range of measures, such as waste and managing expiry. Mark, perhaps you'd like to comment on the project execution.
Indeed, thanks, Helen. So in our experience to date, when we put project teams together, it's very important that all elements of technical competence are included in the project team right from day one. And this is what we do when we're developing our quick-to-clinic timelines with our clients. Both teams, we have one project manager, but both teams represented at kickoff meetings. They develop one timeline that covers all the drug product activities, but also the packaging, labeling, and QP release activities. Those projects are actively tracked by a single project manager, and a lot of the communication is dealt with on a day-to-day basis between our respective teams. That helps eliminate a lot of back and forth communication with the client on questions or decisions, because our project teams work very seamlessly together to address concerns as they arise. Importantly, that also makes adjustments easier to handle. When you compare the situation with managing two independent vendors, the client, as Helen said, is often in the middle, and so decisions on what to do in one scenario versus another often go back to the middleman. However, by working together as a single project team between Patheon and Fisher clinical teams, we can actively keep each other informed of adjustments to timeline, adjustments of need, or technical challenges that we're dealing with, and that allows changes be absorbed and adjusted as we go, and therefore keep the project on track. And the technical challenges are one thing, and Helen, maybe you can say more about what the importance of the communication within the teams from product right through to packaging.
I think I'd like to, Mark. I think that's an important element. So I kind of like to think of the project manager as being the conductor of the symphony of the clinical supplies world. So with that analogy in mind, the open communication is actually really key. So the team shares information that's meaningful, but that information is also acted upon. So there's a lot of proactivity in the team, a lot of passing and exchange of information and updates. And so within the development and clinical trials, there's always a plan, and in that environment there can sometimes be emerging issues, so we need to have a change of plan. And in those circumstances, it's really important that everybody knows who to go to, who to tell, so that everybody can be informed, we can pull together the team, and we can look at the resolution, and we do that really rather quickly indeed. The handover and the lack of the handover in this combined offering means that there's no loss of ownership. The team knows what they're accountable for and they're driving for that. And sometimes with multiple vendors, you can have separate teams that each focus on their own speciality rather than treating the project holistically. So we've overcome that obstacle, and we have a lot of coherent communication going on within the team. And then the final piece that I'd like to bring in is expertise. So we have a core team, but we also have key subject matter experts that we'll bring into the team when we require them. And there's nobody more special in our environment than the qualified person. So we bring the qualified person in when we need to for consultation, and we have other technical support on hand during the life cycle of the project. So overall, our experience indicates that ownership and engagement are higher in the unified team, and where there's a platform of trust, they're more likely to be thinking about the future, anticipating needs, and creating solutions. Mark, would you like to take us through perhaps the timeline?
Sure. So the slide now on screen really is a depiction of how the program works as you go through both drug product development sections and through the clinical pack and labeling up to the end release to clinic. So from the point of receipt of a client's API, we immediately go into a prototype development phase. This looks at developing both a lead and a backup formulation. Those formulations are relatively simple. They are based on a common stock of excipients that we hold on based on our experience that we've developed over the last few years, and that allows us to progress either a simple API and capsule type solution or indeed a simple blend in a capsule that can be used to dose people quickly within 12 weeks. So we will develop a lead and prototype very quickly and get those down on stability. Our driver here is to really get prototype stability developed, built as quickly as possible, because that will be the key data that supports your IMPD or IND submission. In parallel with that stability timeline, we will validate all the analytical methods necessary and prepare for clinical production. You can see that we time about a 3-week period for manufacture itself, and that starts from the point of confirmation of stability at the 1-month time point. And as soon as that manufacture is complete, we are moving through the QA phase to ensure that it's reviewed and ready for shipment to the Fisher clinical facilities. In addition, once we have finished production, we are aiming to start stability on the clinical batch as quickly as possible. And that's something that's also needed to support the submission, but also can support any expiry dating. So by close coordination between our teams at Patheon and Fisher Clinical, we can keep each other informed of how things progress through this timeline, through day-to-day conversations or weekly more formal calls. And then by the time we get to CTM and we are almost finished manufacturing, we can alert and make sure that the clinical team in Fisher Horsham or in Basel or wherever is ready to receive the bulk. And we can then expedite shipment under quarantine so that it arrives at their facility ready to be blistered or bottled as need be. And Helen, maybe you can say a bit about the packaging piece.
Thanks, Mark. And I think that's a really important point that you brought up. So that ability to ship while the product is still undergoing its final testing, and it will of course be held under strict control, saves valuable time which can then be used for processing at the receiving site. So, as Mark said, with full visibility to the completion dates, it's possible to really plan to a detailed level, being proactive in the preparation phase, and as an example, for us to create the item master in order to receive the product into our specialised clinical ERP system, and to initiate our processes immediately upon receipt. So it will arrive on our dock, it will go through goods receipt, it will go through all of our quality control procedures, and it will be available to our production teams. We organise our batch documentation, our CAD diagrams to support label placement and assembly, and the clinical trial labels all in advance so that they are, as we describe them, all in place or ready to go the moment that drug product arrives, which means that we can move very fast indeed. Through the prior awareness, we can deliver a streamlined timeline with less queue time, so things don't stop and start. We know that they're coming, they go on that journey as fast as is possible, and that gives us flexibility in our schedule also to compress in case we need to accommodate any last-minute changes. For unusual design requirements, we will have already pressure tested our solution of our package design in our learning laboratory, and so we will be confident that the process that we're going to follow will work in practice. Equally important in maintaining the timeline is the final step, that all-important QP certification. The QPs are informed and included in the plan early on, so they have the awareness of the IMP prior to release. They can also be requested to triage the documentation package, and if you like, you could consider that a pre-flight check in order to make sure that all is good to go prior to the formal submission at the end of the process. And all of that happens within a 2-week timescale. So we're really very pleased with the efforts that we've got to compress the timelines and to deliver what is, compared to the traditional methodology, a significant timeline reduction. Mark, would you like to take us through what that means?
So overall, you can see in 14 weeks from the point of receipt of API, we're able to deliver you clinically released product. And that's not just product that's being QP certified, but also includes the stability data you will need to submit your dossier for approval to the agencies. We are able to do this in a number of formulation types: blend in capsule, API in bottle, API in capsule, soft gel capsules, and even blend on bottle. We see a wide range of requests in this area, and sometimes not all molecules are suitable for each solution. And so we want to touch on some of the technical challenges that we've seen and how we've dealt with them within this program. Because although simple in concept, developing phase 1 formulations that are intended to be simple can present many challenges. Our experience very much points to the API as one of the greatest sources of variability, and where technical challenges arise. We've seen on many occasions that API sourced from one source, although believed to be the same as that from a different source, can differ quite significantly in its behavior during formulation and processing. So understanding the physical characteristics of the API are really important, and also how the product will flow. So, for example, with our Excelidose offering, which is basically putting API in a capsule, not all molecules are suitable for that solution, just purely based on the flow characteristics of the powder. So what we often do is that prototype batching and feasibility check to make sure that the properties are suitable for the solution that we are looking for. So in cases where API in capsule is not suitable, that's where we look for a blend in capsule and so on, because that is easier to get into man quickly. So it's very important we understand the properties of the API very quickly at this stage of development, so we can come up with the right solution for your particular product. In this program, where speed is of the essence, what we're looking to develop is a phase-appropriate formulation. This program is not intended to go into long, in-depth scientific development or QPD studies or anything like that. This program is very much designed for those companies who need to get a product into clinic quickly to show clinical results that defend the proof of concept and allow stakeholders to make decisions on how to move forward. So it is a simple capsule formulation, it is a simple approach, and by that, taking that route, you're both minimizing your investment in drug product development, but you're also achieving a clinical readout quicker, which will allow you to make decisions on how to progress your molecule to the next phase. Importantly, batch stability is a very important aspect of your dossier. It's important that we're able to expiry date product in the right way, and so therefore we have included in the program both prototype stability data and also clinical. And that is very important to reduce timelines, but also give you the confidence that your prototypes will behave in the same way as your clinical material that you've designed. So those are some of the technical challenges, and the message here really from a drug product development point of view is this program is really intended to keep it simple. Where you need a quick read of the efficacy of a product or the safety profile of the product in clinic, keeping it simple, getting it into trials as quickly as possible so you can get a read is the real driver here to hopefully allow you make the decisions you need for ongoing future development. From the packaging side, we also see challenges, and Helen, maybe you'd like to say a few words about them.
Thanks, Mark. So I think as Mark alluded to, we're thinking about speed. So just coming back to some of those themes that we've explored earlier, streamlined process supports receipt to release in 10 working days for simple designs, and that's really important. As we said, we'd implemented our process improvement tools to do the value stream mapping and looked at applying improved operating model techniques. So we talk a lot about being nimble, having agility in our supply chain in order to provide that responsiveness to be able to act on those opportunities. We've also done some standardization of the supply operations for these types of projects. So we look at the types of interactions, for example, the componentry that we can use, and some of the systems and tools. We conduct parallel processing through the integrated team, so obviously we can work on label text designs while the development activities are still taking place in Mark's shop. And then we have the advantage that our Patheon colleagues are providing documentation direct. This results in the cycle time reduction, which we've talked about, and then also protection of the available shelf life. And I think that that's an important aspect, because if we can reduce the administrative burden for the clinical site where they don't have to perform any additional update labeling, then that's a very positive outcome. We leverage our global network of qualified persons in the distribution hubs. We have the network that we referred to earlier, and that provides the flexibility for a regional approach. It supports early phase projects in the emerging region. Sponsors are supported consistently through a consultative project management approach. And that means that we're going to provide the assistance and we're going to navigate the process the same way throughout, whether it's the first time that you're going to be involved in such a trial or it's going to be the hundreds. We are also going to include an explanation of the standard tools that we'll deploy, and we'll cover those at the kick-off meeting, so nothing will be a surprise. We bring reliability from proven experience. So Fisher Clinical itself brings 20 years of clinical trial experience to your project. We have supplied trial medication for over 95% of the top 50 selling drugs. And we ship more than 250,000 kits per year and have supported the development of 250 small and large molecules in the last 3 years. This is what we do. This is what we're good at. I think we'll just return to the timely release to clinic because it's an important element. That's delivered through our proactive project management. It's supported by the strong communication amongst the team and that awareness for the QP team to be able to have access to documents, for them to be able to discuss any of the documentation requirements, anything around the API, and to be invited into the dialogue early so that there are no last-minute hitches. And I think that element of preparation always results in a good cycle time and a right first-time pass. And of course, we always practice what we preach, and we conduct an after-action review of each cycle so that we can pass that knowledge on to the next project. So I think now we'd like to pass it back to Kaylin for our next polling question.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to invite everyone to participate in a second polling question. Again, please click directly on your screen to submit your answer. And the question is, what is your preference in managing QP release to clinic? In-house or external provider? Again, what's your preference in managing QP release to clinic? In-house or external provider? I'll give you one more second before I pull up those results. And we see here a preference toward in-house. Helen and Mark?
I think that that's an interesting response, and so I think that there's no surprise that many of us like to control our own destiny, and so I think we fully understand why those that chose the in-house solution chose to do so. And I think a significant number also looking to an external provider, and I think that that may also reflect, Mark, the fact that sometimes it's a challenge to have a qualified person, particularly if you are a startup company, you perhaps, that's a rather expensive resource that might want to have on one's books, whilst one only has maybe a limited number of compounds to conduct. So do you have any additional perspective that you would like to share?
Well, our experience is very much that many of our clients have access to qualified people to be able to release their products, but oftentimes those individuals are consultants. And so it's like dealing with an additional supplier, if you like. And what the benefit of our program is that our qualified people know the program from start to end because they've been working on both sides of the equation from product through the packaging from end to end. And so they understand the systems, they understand the way we work, and they understand what's involved in the project. And so what we believe our QP services can offer by being part of our same network is really that end-to-end knowledge that gives the qualified person the confidence to release the product in a very timely manner. And that saves our clients effort and time by having to work with one person less, if you like.
Thanks, Mark. So let's look at how we can reach the milestones faster. And I think it's really important to focus on quality. So let's start with that top left-hand box. What is it telling us? It says that speed is important, but consistent high quality is a must. And of course, we all understand that, but what does it mean in practice? So quality is the underpinning platform for our success. While our quality team are engaged throughout the process, including at an operational level, it's the quality culture of our organisation which ensures our focus on right first time to maintain those on-time delivery metrics. So whether it's the quality initiatives that we're running or whether it's our quantum quality efforts, we're focusing on doing the right thing every time. And that helps us maintain our speed through the process. Data. It's available at the right time to enable key decisions to be made and to progress filing. On the top right, our capabilities and experience are complementary and synergistic. Both Patheon and Fisher are recognised for depth of knowledge and the breadth of capabilities offered. First-in-human trials are a significant milestone in the drug development process. We can enable you to get there faster through the combination of these critical success factors. Given the pressures that we discussed earlier, our compliant approach fully supports the imperative for speed. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Helen. So we'd like to share with you an example, a very recent example of how this worked in practice. So we were approached some months ago by a small biotech company, a real startup with limited resources. And their challenge to us was to get a dose form that they could give to first patient in December time. Their constraint really was that they only could provide us with developmental scale API in September and then the GMP supply of API in October. So really, they were really pressured to deliver the material within a very short time frame. They came to us because of their past experience. So when they challenged us with this timeline, we sat down and looked at how to best deliver it, knowing what was already known about the API and how we could manage to deliver this within the time frame suggested. And that's where we sat down and included our colleagues in Fisher Clinical right from the word go so we could discuss and map out the timeline together. So how we approach this is both parts of the equation, product and packaging, are contracted with the client and under one proposal and one master services agreement. That simplified the way that the approvals happened and we could get going on the project quicker. We had assigned one lead project manager to oversee both parts of the program, and the teams met on a joint basis week in, week out to deal with the updates as they are required and the challenges as they arise. It was not a simple project by any stretch. In fact, what we learned very quickly was that when we did the developmental scale batches, the API behaved in one way, but when we received the GMP supply, which was from the same supplier, it behaved very differently, and so that posed quite significant problems of basically how to get their powder blend into the capsule shell size that they really wanted. Our teams, based on their experience, were able to face that problem and come up with technical solutions. But in parallel with dealing with those problems, our project manager was constantly in contact with the technical team at Horsham and therefore was able to discuss and adjust the schedule as it needed to in order to meet with when we could deliver the clinical product. Our client was involved throughout, but they clearly recognized that the Patheon and Fisher Clinical teams were working in very close partnership with that, and their feedback to us was very much it did feel like they were dealing with a single supplier and that they saw the flexibility on timelines and so on. Oftentimes we do hear from our clients that many contract packaging houses have very firm dates, and if clients don't produce their product on a given date, they can lose their slot. But by working through the same company, the same vendor, which produces both, or that manages both services, we were able to absorb those differences and those adjustments and be able to meet their needs on a very quick and timely basis. So at the end of the day, we were able to ship the product to Horsham within the 12 weeks we had for product development, and the packaging and QP release was completed within the following 2 weeks, which meant that after 14 weeks from receipt of the first API, they were very happy that they had a QP certified product that they were able to progress into the clinical setting within the original timeframes they suggested. And that was despite the technical challenges that arise that caused a bit of rework in terms of how we fill the capsules. So basically, what lessons did we learn from that experience? And these are common with all the quick-to-clinic programs we've handled over recent years. Certainly, we have learned in the last 18 months of being in partnership with Fisher Clinical that by reducing the working together really reduces the complexity for our clients. They have gained confidence that we can proactively deliver this service because they see us working together day in, day out. They have all parties on the calls at the same time, and they have grown in confidence that truly we are delivering a seamless service. We have a broad network of technical experts we can reach out to, and where issues or challenges arise, we can solve them quickly. The experience with many of our clients really is that when you're coming into phase 1 and you need a quick read from the clinic, really keep it simple. It's important that we develop simple blends for people who want to get into the clinic quick, and therefore, phase appropriate formulations are really important where you need to get a quick read so that you can satisfy the needs of your stakeholders. One other learning that we have seen over years is that many of our clients, when they file, can tend to put a lot of detail into regulatory filings, and sometimes that can cause challenges when we reach technical difficulties in a program. So, for example, some clients have in the past specified a certain capsule size within their dossier, and then when it comes to the development, the API density or some physical property may have changed that makes that capsule size no longer feasible. So that would be a dossier change if you were to change the size of capsule that was registered. So our advice to people really is, if you don't need to say it in a dossier, don't. You can say it's an API in capsule without specifying the actual size if you don't have to, and therefore it gives you more flexibility as you go through the development pipe. And the other and final lesson really is that vendors do have a lot of experience, because in the CDMO arena we work with many clients of all shapes and sizes all throughout the year, and our technical people have exposure to a lot of different formulations and processes. Through our experience, we can offer a lot of advice to people, and it's very unusual for us not to have a solution to your problem, because we've probably dealt with it before at some space and time somewhere in our network. So, when we talk about tips for project success, we talked about the technical and we talked about the communication, and really the next slide, Helen, really sums it up for our clients.
Thanks, Mark. So as a former project manager, I'd like to share with you my top tips for project success. And as we've discussed throughout, communication is a critical success factor. And your assigned project manager will take the important role, as I used the analogy earlier, of the orchestra conductor, to keep the pace, to ensure everyone performs to their best, and that we maintain the elegance of the solution that we're providing. Let's keep our best practices in mind. So the decision-making rules and responsibilities, it may seem obvious, it's your product, the decision-making rights are yours, but it's always good to have a reference framework, the rules of the road, so that we understand where the delegated decision-making is and where the boundaries lie. The decision-making scope should be really clear. And also vendors do their best work when following their established processes, so where possible, allowing them to do so and avoiding customization is helpful. An escalation pathway. It may seem obvious, we need to know who to communicate to. This is the world of development, and things happen, things go awry, exactly as Mark described. The first wave of the batch of product behaved differently to the second. And so we all need to be able to discuss those situations with the right decision makers to keep things moving. So it's a great investment of time early on in the project to know who is responsible for what and who we should take which issues to. When we think about the SWOT analyses and the risks, risk management is very popular in regulatory circles. It's best to be prepared. Identify the issues, rank any project risks early on, have that contingency planning in your back pocket so that you know what plan B is, so that you're ready to roll if you need to adopt it. Agreeing timeframes for deliverables and the communication frequency. What is frequent versus regular? Everybody has a different definition, so terminology can vary between firms. It's good practice to check for understanding and highlight what good looks like for you. Our project managers are going to work to a defined schedule, but if you would like to receive something more frequently, a summary or a rag sheet that tells you the project status, these are all tools that we can do for you. And also we should set realistic expectation on deliverables and use our project plans to highlight the options and any risks, and also showcasing from our experience what might be impacting those timelines and continuing to work on the backup plans. The collaborative partnership. So there can be a perception that information can get diluted across teams and communications are more challenging when using vendors. And perhaps that's not so. I think taking the attitude that we're all in it together and that we are one team engenders trust, and you'll see that from our project managers. And under these conditions, you'll find your partner contributes more in terms of innovation, technical knowledge, quality, and advice. We should be thinking about that continuous improvement philosophy. What have we learned that we can apply back into the project and also to future projects? I'm going to hand over to Mark now.
Thank you, Helen. So really that summarises how we came about our Quick to Clinic offering and what it can do for you. And it's a program, again, that's very important when you're aiming to get a quick read of clinical data to allow you to make decisions on how to progress your model. It is really designed for simple formulations. It's designed for speed, and by working with a single vendor that can provide you both product and packaging services, in addition to the end qualified person release, we believe the Thermo Fisher company, which is comprised both Patheon and Fisher Clinical, can offer you really good solutions for your molecule. So, and we believe that our company can get you that phase 1 clinical trial material quicker through a bigger choice of dosage forms and to a very strong level of quality in the time in 14 weeks, which is really going to accelerate your development process and decision time frame. So, and you know, that's what we believe is really our mission, is to develop molecules quicker and get them to clinic, get them to customers and patients as fast as possible, because in the end, we believe we supply hope. So with that, that really concludes our presentations, and I might like to turn it over to questions.
Okay. Thank you both, Helen and Mark, for such informative presentations. And before we get started on the question and answer session, I'd like to quickly remind the audience that they can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found on the right-hand side of the presentation window, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Okay, let's get to the first question. How robust is the formulation phase if it only takes 1 to 2 weeks?
Yes, so the program is really designed to be a quick solution. So we are not talking here about robust formulation development. We are basing this on our learnings. We hold a common stock of excipients. We have experience with different types of molecules which those excipients can or cannot work with. And really what we're looking at is very simple powder blends at best. So this is not intended to be tablet or intended to be really in-depth formulation development. It's designed for getting to clinic quickly. It's designed to with an element of risk, but it's choosing the excipients that are relatively simple to be able to get a very simple formulation. So I would say it's not robust necessarily in the strict terms of what QBD or other programs are. It's something that facilitates you getting to clinic as quick as possible.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to the next question. So this is in reference to the 14-week timeline that you mentioned throughout your presentation. And the question is, if the API needs size reduction work that would be included, would that be included in the 14 weeks? Does Patheon have capabilities to look into different size reduction or solubility enhancement techniques?
So Patheon does offer solubility enhancement solutions, and although we don't have in-house micronization capabilities, we do work very closely with vendors who provide that service for us on our behalf. The Quick to Clinic program itself would not normally include micronization work. As I mentioned, they're very simple formulations, and so if you have challenges of flow that's a result of the particle size, then it's unlikely to be delivered within the 14 weeks. What we're looking at here is APIs that are already at their correct particle size or the intended particle size, and then looking at simple blends to allow them to be dosed quickly.
Okay, very good. Let's move on. Someone would like to know, what aspects for the stages of scaling can you provide?
So I guess this is in relation to how you would, what scales of process we can offer, and then how would that progress up as you go through clinical development. So at the early development stage, Milton Park is a standalone development site, so we really focus on project or process scales that are in single kilo range. And so our maximum batch size is something like 7.5 kilos, but the minimum could be as little as a handful of capsules and so on, because we employ a range of hand filling technologies. So basically, we operate in the ranges of, single numbers of capsules up to anything of 30,000 for a phase 1 batch, something like that. And then where clients want to scale that into more bigger scales to serve phase 2 or phase 3 products, we can do some of that work here, and we can also scale into our larger facilities located throughout the world. For example, we partner very closely with our French facility near Lyon, which develop phase 2, phase 3 formulations, and our teams work very close with them to make sure that the scaling happens in a very effective and efficient manner.
Okay, thank you so much. Here's the next one. At what stage is the analytical method transfer or validation done, and to what extent?
So the starting point really for the program is receipt of the API, and normally a API method is easily available because that's what's being used at the API synthesis facility. So we take that method and we establish it quickly in-house, and in parallel with the prototype development, we will develop the assay method and, if needed, related substances, etc., in the same method, so that we have what we need in time for a release of the clinical batch. So the method transfer happens right at the start. The development happens in parallel with prototypes and the validation over the course of the stability program. The state of validation, or the extent of validation, is really geared for phase 1. So it is not the whole comprehensive validation you may see at phase 3, but just enough of the parameters that's needed to satisfy the regulators' requirements for a phase 1 product.
Excellent, thank you. Let's move to the next question. Does your service also include compiling of an IMPD?
So we can help with that. So we provide the technical support documents that are needed to go into an IMPD, and we have in-house regulatory support services that we can access, and they can help support the writing phase as needed. So we collaborate between the technical teams and the regulatory experts to ensure that we can actually write the CMC part of the dossier. Of course, one part that we may not be fully able to do is comment on all the API aspects of the dossier and so on. So we would need to collaborate, if needed, with other people to make sure that we're aligned with what the requirements are for the drug substance, etc. So, but we can certainly help and contribute to the CMC section.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And before moving to the next question, we just wanted to revisit a point from one of our first questions about particle size reduction capabilities. Is that available at Florence East?
Yes, it is. I think so, yes.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, let's move on to the next question. How do IND and IMPD submission needs fit with timelines?
So basically, our clients need to submit their dossier and have approval before they can dose patients. And the requirements are slightly different, as I understand them, between European and North American requirements. Basically, we provide the batch documentation, the analytical methods, and so on that can go into that submission. And one of the rate-limiting factors of any program going in that phase is the provision of stability data so that we can assign a shelf life to the product. So the key part of our program and the product side is really to generate stability data that allows the correct labeling of expiry date, but also gives enough support into the INPD dossier to justify a shelf life for the duration of a phase 1 trial. And Helen, maybe you can say a bit about how the clinical packaging bits fit in with that.
I think that the clinical packaging component is very supportive of that timeline. I think that we can again provide some advice through what we have with our qualified persons. We have the ability to reflect on very simple componentry and make comments about how we could identify the types of components that will be used that can then go in to the submission. So I think it's very much supportive of what you said, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's try to squeeze in a couple more. Quickly, are developed methods a prerequisite both for API and FP?
No, as we say, our starting point is really the API method. Once we have the API method usually supplied by the API manufacturer, which could be a patent facility but can easily be a third-party facility, we transfer in that method and we can develop it from scratch appropriate for the drug formulation that we're working on. So that's basically where we start from. That's what we do. That's our starting point.
Excellent, thank you. And our last question, what happens if the delivery of my API is delayed?
Yeah, and that's a situation that comes up quite often. So, we're often asked about what the boundaries are of this service, and it really is we start the clock ticking from the moment we receive the developmental API in-house. And oftentimes there will be a gap or a break between the formulation work and receiving the actual GMP intended API. So really, in that scenario, we're saying that the total touch time of the product, where assuming API is available, is the 14-week time frame. So the way we handle it is we obviously want to keep as close as possible to our clients and understand the delivery time frame for that API, which is usually known well in advance. But of course, things happen, or there may be delays in analysis that delay its delivery. And in those situations, we just work closely with our clients to try and mitigate any delay as much as possible. And so that's by constant communication, understanding what it is, and then looking to accommodate an adjusted schedule as much as we can and still achieve the timelines. But overall, our Quick to Clinic program of 14 weeks assumes there's no delay in the API delivery.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark and Helen. We really appreciate it. And unfortunately, we are now out of time. I want to thank the audience for attending and for participating in today's event. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Patheon, part of Thermo Fisher Scientific, for making today's webcast possible. Today's program will be available on demand viewing through December of 2019, and you will receive an email from Pharmaceutical Technology alerting you when this webcast will be available for replay. We invite you to forward that announcement to any colleagues who may have missed today's live event. Thanks to everyone for joining. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.